Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order when you check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Sports Pictorium Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. If he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL helmet poster. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1.
This is our league, and this is your league. From the 55-yard line on CFL America Radio and the Sports History Network.
This is a league of A's and BCs. It's green and red and gold and black and blue. This is a league with 2 official languages and many unofficial languages. It's East versus West, wheat versus iron, love versus hate. This is a league where superstars are extraordinary and ordinary at the same time. It's a league of ice, of fog, of mud and wind. And for one Sunday in November, it's the nation's glue. This is a league as diverse as a country, a league of Jacksons and Kwongs, Johnsons, Moscas, O'Shea's, and Haji Razulis. This is his league, her league, their league, and their league. It's my league, and it's your league. This is our league.
Welcome to the 55-yard line here with Scott and Greg on Sports History Network and CFL America Radio. We were delighted to be joined today from Vancouver by the president of Football Canada, who's also a member of the selection committee of the Canadian Football Hall of Fame and the host of Gridiron Nation on TSN, Jim Mullin. Hey, Jim, thanks for joining us, and happy to have you here to talk CFL history, Canadian football history, and hopefully some BC Lions history too.
Oh, yeah, I think I can cover those bases. I think I've been around long enough that I have a few stories to tell.
Cool.
Yeah, the BC Lions was kind of my gateway team into the CFL because they started showing in the States the syndicated games in the early 70s. And Johnny Musso, who had just played at Alabama, played for the BC Lions. So there was that was really how the Canadian Football League first got some press in Alabama, or the first time I remember it.
Well, Johnny Musso, who played, I believe at the time, with quarterback Don Moorhead at Michigan. And Musso started as number 21, ended up wearing number 22. They took it out of retirement. Points to you guys if you can remember who originally wore 22 and had his number retired.
I fail. I can't remember.
I will say that he started in a Super Bowl.
Cap.
Joe Cap. Joe Cap is the correct answer. And then Joe Cap came back as general manager of the BC Lions in 1990. They brought Doug Flutie in, and they unretired his number again, so Doug Flutie could wear number 22 with the BC Lions.
That explains it. That's why that
there's
number
quite
did not
a history
register
there, man. Yeah, there's quite a history around that number in the BC Lions football team.
Well, so Flutie was with the BC Lions for how many years?
2 years.
Okay. And refresh my memory, was BC his first stop in the CFL?
BC was his first stop. And, it was really unfortunate. We had a flamboyant owner here by the name of Murray Pesum. He was a stock promoter mainly of mines, and the stock exchange in Vancouver at the time was the Vancouver Stock Exchange, and they said Howe Street, which it was on, was the only street in Canada, when the sun was up, both sides were shady. And so he, he was a guy that was bust and boom all the time. And for a while, he had a good run with the BC Lions as an owner. But then he decided to play hardball with Doug Flutie and went to the province newspaper here in Vancouver, basically said, this is the offer, take it or leave it. And he left it. And he went to Calgary as a free agent. And that's where the rest of Doug Flutie's career went to Calgary, then went to Toronto. Oddly enough, that contract that made to Doug Flutie in Calgary, at least $300,000 of it was never paid by the former owner of the Calgary Stampeders to Mr. Flutie before he moved on to Toronto. So
yeah, I've heard that story. Did he ever collect on it later in his career?
No, it's so sometimes we know, those of us who do a lot of things on contract. Let's just call it breakage. Like, there's some dollars that are never returning.
Right. Well, Doug Flutie has always been one of those guys that, being in Chicago, I mean, I remember that brief time he played for the Bears, just one of my favorite all-time players. But to me, he's always personified what the CFL has always been about. He's always been, playing for the love of football, the underdog. And to me, and I know with what's been going on the last 18 months, obviously the CFL has had a lot of issues we're having a lot of issues going into the season with financially and with the pandemic and everything. How are things looking in terms of the future with the CFL now that we're getting ready to start the season next week? Just in your opinion, I mean, to me, my gut feeling is things are looking up. Things are going to look up once we get past this pandemic.
Well, it depends what area code you live in, quite frankly. I think if you're in Western Canada, there's going to be a good response to the product. I think in a place like Ottawa, where OSEG, who runs the team there and has great roots in the community, will find a way to bring people back to the park. I think Hamilton has the Grey Cup on its side, and that'll certainly help what they do in that community. Of course, that leaves out the three largest markets in this country. And, the Toronto and MLSC will not quash rumors of possibly leaping to the XFL in 2023. The childhood friend of one of the owners at MLSE owns the Montreal Alouettes. And I think those two teams are basically singing from the same songbook when it comes to, points of leverage to use against other franchises in this league. And then you have the BC Lions that were owned by David Braley since the late 1990s. Mr. Braley passed away over a year ago now, and it's being run by the estate. And it's kind of being run in auto mode right now with a minimum of investment until they can find an owner. No ownership group wants to touch this thing until they get through this season and can properly evaluate. Certainly, money will be lost in Vancouver this year due to pandemic guidelines and the exposure in the city. The one thing that's a little frustrating for me, and I've heard this echoed in a few places, Rob Vanstone, the writer out of Regina, being one of them, is we don't see how the CFL right now is really changing their business model as they emerge from this pandemic. They're in a place where they're doing the same things, at least the individual franchises are. And to a certain degree, they can't be blamed for that because there were a lot of losses incurred through the pandemic. Everybody was on hold. There were a lot of challenges, and they're doing things with a whole lot less staff, both at the league level and at the club level. But one of the things that no change in approach signals to me is that release that went out, I'd say it'd be about a month ago now, about the XFL and the CFL breaking off talks were the words at the end that said "at this time," and that as soon as I read that, I thought, okay, let's wait for the other shoe to drop on this thing and see where it takes us the day after Grey Cup, and see where that discussion goes after Grey Cup. So, in terms of having a positive attitude about the league, I'm positive because it's back, because they're playing football. I guarantee it's going to be some really sloppy yet sometimes exciting football because it's sloppy. With that time off and no exhibition games. But there are points of concern in the major markets. Maybe a way to address those points of concern would be through revenue sharing from the richer teams. Oddly enough, in the smaller markets, sharing revenue with the Montreals, the Torontos, and the Vancouvers.
It's just, from the outside looking in, I have you're looking at a league with only 9 franchises, but to have so many factions, that's just, it's almost disturbing. You're thinking, oh gosh, if you can't get 9 teams all on the same page, you got a problem. But then again, if you look at the different parts of the country and the different ownership groups, it makes sense that way. But it's still, as an American who's a huge CFL fan, has been one since, the mid 70s, I just want it to succeed. I don't care how it succeeds. I just want it to work.
Well, when you talk about the ownership groups, they are vastly different, and part of that's inherited. In Western Canada, the history of the teams in the old WIFU all the way through to the Western Division, right up until the 90s, all the teams were like the Green Bay Packers. They were community nonprofit, even though they made profit organizations. The Lions went to private ownership in the late 1980s because of some financial problems and some poor planning. Quite frankly, the same thing happened with the Calgary Stampeders in the mid 80s. But the 3 most successful teams in this league are community nonprofits. They're Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Saskatchewan. So what you have in the Canadian Football League is essentially you have 3 groups. You have the community nonprofits. You have teams that are owned for profit by MLSE, by Mr. Stern in Montreal, to a certain degree OSEG, and then prior to Mr. Braley passing, you've got the philanthropists, right? You've got the BCs, you got the Hamiltons. Calgary used to be in that pack, but now that they've moved to the Flames ownership group, they're more of a profit-driven organization. You've got multimillionaires and billionaires who want to do something good for the community, don't really care about profit and loss. You've got others that have to answer to stockholders and stakeholders, and they need to show a profit at some point in time. And then you've got community organizations who've got it locked down and maybe hesitant in terms of sharing their profits with an organization like MLSE, who pays Kyle Lowry $650,000 a night to play basketball. That's money going out of Saskatchewan to a team in Toronto owns the Raptors, the Leafs, go down the line, right? That would not be taking that money and reinvesting it in their community, to the 2 university teams, to the 2 junior teams, to the women's teams, to the minor teams. People, one of the issues I think around people covering the CFL is they only see those 9 teams. I was on another podcast where I try to explain that football in the United States is 3 very strong pillars, right? It's high school, college, and professional, and you're not shaking the foundation of any of those 3. In Canada, it's an ecosystem. Part of that is because we've got non-import players playing in the league, making up half the rosters. So if you start pulling away at some of those foundations of those smaller groups that are spread out across a country as massive as Canada, with only about 37 million people, you have one of them collapse, then others around them can collapse. So it's important to when we start talking about the complexities of ownership in the CFL, and you look at those nonprofits, they got a lot more people to answer to if they're making that decision before they ship money off to Montreal or Vancouver to fund losing operations.
Right. And in terms of Football Canada, in terms of with the CFL, does Football Canada have any influence on any CFL and the commissioner's office, any CFL decision making, at least, but the grassroots and marketing the game to Canadians?
Well, the CFL is an associate member of Football Canada. That's something that we brought on board in the last couple of years. And prior to this June, their number two person was board of directors. Now he's the CFL rep. And I'd say I probably have conversations with Randy Ambrosi about 2 or 3 times a year about where we're at. Now, our groups in amateur football, when we saw the XFL thing emerging as a story with on the bone, we had a discussion about how does this impact amateur football in Canada, and it would impact amateur football in Canada, at least the tackle game, quite adversely if the CFL were to split off and run some other rule set. So we communicated to the CFL that please consider our position. Well, the CFL is a business; they're going to make business decisions. Now, it's up to them whether they want to consider where amateur football is at. Maybe they're hoping that if they make changes, we just fall into line. But the cost of falling into that line, if they switch rule sets, if they cut out the Canadian player, which is we believe is a major incentive for universities to have programs for older players to stay engaged in the game, to go to junior programs and universities. If that's cut out, if that outcome is cut out, I think it has a adverse effect. And so the CFL in their messaging to us is, no decisions have been made yet, but if we make decisions, we're making decisions based on our business, not necessarily based on the amateur football is in the country. Now, that being said, there are a number of very constructive and progressive voices within the CFL office that reach out to us and work with us on the programming that we've created for minor football and amateur football in the country, going all the way down to kids just starting out the ages of 4 or 5, and working with our provincial organizations who are our members to get kids playing football. So it's a different arrangement than what's in the United States. USA Football is an organization that was built kind of as a marketing tool for football in the United States. Football Canada was formed in 1880. Wow. we were the start of the sport in this country. In fact, our funding arrangement with the Canadian Football League goes back to 1966. We're the owners of the Grey Cup. They pay us every year in perpetuity as long as they're around to be trustees of the Grey Cup. So when they hand that trophy out, they're handing our trophy out.
I did not
almost
know that.
Under license. The problem is that the folks at Football Canada or the Canadian Amateur Football Association at the time came up with a number that sounded really good in $1966, and because it's in perpetuity, it's never grown since. I'd like to jump in a time machine for that one.
It's like the minimum wage in the United States. It just doesn't change.
Yeah, exactly. We got a flat line through a couple of generations.
So all that money I hear about people talking about having their name put on the Grey Cup, does that go to Football Canada? Or I've heard some other podcasters talk about it, and they're like, well, we're paying money to the CFL to get our name on the Grey Cup. And I'm like, okay, well, that sounds great, but who's getting the money? And so it's not going to Football Canada.
No. And that pedestal, basically you get your name on the pedestal that they put the Grey Cup on, right? that pedestal was a smart way for a number of the teams in the CFL, I think, to hold on to season ticket deposits during the pandemic and give fans the option of hey, you can do this and find a way to keep the money in house, because they needed to find some inventive ways to keep the lights on through this.
Yeah, I know, and I know. And Scott and I been talking about the history and kind of where the league's going. I mean, there's that subject always comes up, at least amongst the younger crowd, about video games, and in terms of marketing the league to the younger generation. What's it like out in Vancouver with the BC Lions in terms of the BC Lions within the community? Now, I know the Lions were started in the late 50s, being the last, I guess, of the original CFL teams. How did the BC Lions start? They were a community-owned organization.
That's right. From what you said. That's right.
How did that come about for the Lions to be how did the expansion to Vancouver happen?
Well, there was a group that were aligned with the Mariloma Athletic Club. Now the Marilomas at the time ran a junior football team, but they also ran a rugby team. They're your classic kind of European type club, in that they ran a number of different sports in Vancouver. And it was a group that was brought together prior to the British Empire Games, which are now known as the Commonwealth Games. And they knew that a new stadium was being built for those Commonwealth Games, Empire Stadium, seating back in that day about 35,000. By the time we got to the 70s, the official capacity was 30,229. So they assembled a nonprofit ownership group. They went to the Western Interprovincial Football Union, and there were teams that were opposed to this expansion because they were afraid Vancouver, with their big 35,000 seat stadium, was going to just dominate everyone and buy players from the United States. And we know that never really turned out to be the case with the BC Lions. But there were things that were put in subsequently in later years as a result of that equalization, which is similar to profit or revenue sharing that's being talked about right now. We had gate equalization in this league from I want to say the late 1950s, early 60s, all the way through to the late 1970s, where gates were split for teams, and that revenue was shared across the board. And that was in part because of the fear of the Lions dominating through massive crowds and massive funds. So it was very much a community effort. There was a team here in the 1940s, 1 year, that played in the WIFU, the Vancouver Grizzlies. That's where the basketball team got their name, and it was started up by a group of people that were associated, I believe, with the Vancouver Athletic Club, but a number of sports writers as well. One of Canada's preeminent sports writers, Jim Coleman, I got to know him in his later years. Told me about putting the Vancouver Grizzlies together. But as we know in this country, the mountains and the distance from the coast keep us kind of separate from the rest of the country in a lot of ways. And there are a lot of challenges sometimes tying into the rest of the country.
Well, you would obviously know this much better than we would. Has there ever, or what's the most serious play, I guess, that the NFL has ever made for the major markets in Canada, or for, whether Montreal, Vancouver, Toronto? I think we know about Toronto's flirtation, but I just wondered, at any time in history, did it ever seem imminent that there really was going to be expansion, of the NFL into Canada?
Well, I think there are a couple of phases of this, and it's run hot and cold through the years. I think The first was in the WLAF when the Montreal Machine landed there in the first incarnation of the WLAF. And in fairness, the Montreal Alouettes or the Concords weren't in operation at that time. So it was an open market for American football to explore. The most obvious one was Rogers and their play to bring the Buffalo Bills into Toronto for the Bills in Toronto series, which oddly enough was, really put together right on the heels of the Argos generating some momentum in that market. I mean, there were times when the Toronto Argonauts were drawing regularly in the 40,000 range, 44,000 range. And the Blue Jays really took the wind out of their sails when they started to go on runs towards pennants and winning back-to-back World Series. But in the early 2000s, mid-2000s, once ownership was settled, they were getting back into that mid-20,000 range, which is good for the bottom two rings of Skydome. After a successful Grey Cup and that they hosted in 2007, I mean, that's when the Bills in Toronto series landed right on the heels of that. So I would also say this. In Vancouver, the Seattle Seahawks have done an outstanding job of marketing in this region. They made a decision, I want to say about 12 to 13 years ago, to come up here with a caravan, be aggressive in the marketplace. And, the Seahawks were kind of stumbling around, back at that time, but they got their game together. They've captivated the imagination in this town. They have 8,000 season ticket holders in the Lower Mainland area and Victoria that go to games on a regular basis, which is more than the BC Lions have as a season ticket base these days. I never thought I'd be caught dead seeing that, but they've been aggressive in the marketplace here, and it's paid off for them. John Horgan, the premier here in BC, was talking about sports coming back. That 17th game that the NFL is running for each of their teams, that's an international game. And I think that one of the things that he alluded to is that you can expect the Seattle Seahawks to be playing a regular season game in Vancouver now on a fairly regular basis. And how that ties into the BC Lions and their new ownership and all of those elements, I think it's important for football in Vancouver that we have a healthy CFL team here, right, that can draw in the mid-20s. I think it's important for the grassroots of the game. I think it's important for the universities and the colleges and it's important for getting back to that ecosystem thing, right? But the ecosystem isn't going to work if you slam a giant pillar down on it, name the Seahawks, and nothing else breathes, right, in the community. So I think the Seahawks coming in with a game almost on an annual basis will need to find a way to accommodate the existing football community here, because I think it's a balancing act for them. They don't have to balance it. They're big enough not to balance it, but I think it's a balancing act for them.
Well, and I know there has been, there was the loan the NFL gave the CFL way back when, $3 million, and that in today's money, that's nothing. But has the CFL ever seriously entered into a discussion with the NFL on some type of partnership? And I think it would be in the NFL's best interest to keep the CFL, for a healthy CFL. Has there ever been any talk that you know of in terms of, not so much the NFL saving the CFL, but entering some type of partnership that promotes promotes football in general, but also promotes the CFL and to get more fans to come to CFL games?
I know that the discussions between the NFL and the CFL in this country through NFL Canada has been really focused on how do we get the word of football out to more people, both on the CFL and the NFL side, approaching the sport that football is football, right, and more people playing football, more kids engaging in the game. It's just generally better for football. But in terms of a formalized arrangement, that isn't there these days. And as you mentioned, the closest to it was that CFL NFL agreement, as the CFL was pulling out of U.S. expansion and needed not only that $3 million, but some of the promotional benefit and the alignment with the shield that came with that. That was important at that time. Oddly enough, that pushed the CFL into a chapter where they really marketed and focused on alignment with patriotism and waving the flag and being proudly Canadian, radically Canadian. Our balls are bigger. That campaign, which they were at the time. I got a J5V here. The thing's as fat. Hold on here. There you go. There's the old '89 J5V.
Oh, nice.
And just you guys have seen this before. The viewers haven't seen this. That's the USFL ball. You can probably tell.
Oh yeah.
These ones were bigger. The punters love these. Punters love these. They added almost a third of a yard to your punting average. But anyway, so the CFL got away from that under Jeffrey Orridge, and I don't see this current group right now, knowing that how uncertain the path is forward for the CFL, and they may need to rely on the XFL. They may need to rely on something that looks totally new. Really pursuing that patriotism angle.
Well, and on that subject, our last podcast, we had Chris Willis from NFL Films. And, I think everybody, whether in Canada or in the States, grew up on NFL Films. If it weren't for NFL Films, I don't think the NFL would be as big as it is now. And has the CFL ever tried to do something with, say, the CBC to have something similar to market the game? And the second part of that is, do you think they would look at doing it now?
Well, oddly enough, that agreement that you were talking about in the late 90s and early 2000s incorporated some level of NFL Films coming up and shooting up for a couple of years.
Really?
And some of those 5 to 7 minute recaps played in movie theaters before movies as part of a marketing push. But that's about the extent of NFL Films up here. One of the things that TSN did in coordination with the 100th Grey Cup was they created the Engraved on a Nation series.
Yeah. Those are beautiful documentaries.
Yeah. So that's about as close as the CFL's come to that. There was an independent producer that did, and the name escapes me now. Scott Woodgate was involved in that. It was a team by team kind of legend series in the mid aughts around 2005, 2006, and they were well done, and they really tapped into Hall of Fame archives and made the most of that. In terms of doing something like NFL Films, I'm not sure if we moved on from NFL Films, quite frankly. I think we got NFL Network now.
Well,
we've got documentaries. Yeah. It's changed. We moved into a digital age, right, where
everything. Amazon, and I'm currently right in the middle of watching a series on Leeds United that follows the team, and so I think like you say, going where you're saying we're in a network type area with that type of stuff being popular. The Hard Knock series, the All or Nothing series. Yeah, to me, I'm watching it. I'm going, it'd be great if they have a CFL one. And I think,
by the way, just as an aside, if you haven't seen The Damned United, a movie that came out about 7 years ago.
It's one of my favorites.
Oh yeah. There's a fair bit of fiction in that, but I'm willing to buy into the fiction to deliver that story. And Sheen is outstanding in it. Sorry to take.
No. That's great.
That's probably my favorite soccer movie. It's incredible.
And it's a great period piece, and it's English soccer movies are some of my favorite, and that one is right at the top of the list. I had a friend of mine. It's
Those guys from Leeds, all like there's a group of them that played in Vancouver at the Whitecaps and led them to the '79 Soccer Bowl. But now we're getting into NASL films, and like, no, let's not go there. Let's not go there.
All right.
Hey, I'll go there anytime. Just if anybody ever wants to talk about that, I'm your guy.
But going back,
Johnny Giles.
But going back with what I was saying, a hard knock, something like that for the CFL. To me, I think that would bring in start bringing in a new generation of fans.
Yeah, I think that they're, with the resources that they have, they've done some good things in the social media space too. But I think there's a lot more to do, and there's a lot more core story. I think what you're talking about is core storytelling,
right?
And I was just on a call with my executive director today at Football Canada, and I'm trying to tell her, have this discussion with her, and she's on board with it now. That if you're not telling your story, you're not selling your game, period. It's we're not splitting the atom here, folks. Like, if you're not constantly dedicated to that storytelling, especially now in a universe where there are so many paths that are trying to get your attention, if you're not creating that content yourselves, that's one of the things that NFL Films is so far ahead unwittingly of everybody else. They were content creators. They're creating their own content. Like, you apply that today, everyone's playing catch up to create their own content and push it out on any number of channels, because the most valued thing these days, I'll tell you, it isn't even content. It isn't what you flip on in your it's your attention. Like, have you noticed the demand on your time going up and up and up as we march along in this digital world? And those things that get your attention and take your time away from other things, quite frankly, are the things that have most value. There's a UN community TV project out there that is being built across the third world, and sports is a component of it, and they will pay people to watch because attention has value. Even if it's only about 25 cents or a cup of coffee, if you watch 3 soccer games, this is in its development stage right now, they're still paying you to watch. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about right now. Is like, it'd be great if the CFL did this. Well, the CFL has to do it to survive. Wow. Any Canadian cultural institution needs to be that content creator to get that attention out there. Any corporation, and worth their weight in salt, has to create that content that engages people, because attention is everything.
Well, I always try to step back, realizing my age and realizing that I'm not fully on top of everything going on with young people and what they want. But, Greg and I have talked about this so many times. I mean, the appeal of the CFL to us, the rules and the gameplay. I mean, it's almost, it seems like if I was marketing it, I would market almost as a different sport. And I know that's pretty extreme, but it's just such a cool game with so many unique and wonderful rules. And that's why we would rather watch football than American football,
because punters matter.
Yeah, they really do.
Well, okay, guys, I'm not sure how much you follow rugby, right?
I love rugby.
During 1999 and 2000, I was touring through Australia shooting content for TSN prior to the Olympics. So I had the opportunity to visit a number of towns and suburbs where they played rugby union and they played rugby league. And like, the two could easily coexist. They also had Australian rules there. This, played on the 220-yard circular pitch. But, the difference between rugby union and rugby league, that there are some that just stayed in one camp or the other, but most people in Australia, they'll watch both. It's not the end of the world to watch a good league game and a good union game. And if anything, if I were in the CFL's camp right now, I'd be looking at ways, and I'd use safety as motivator in this to do things that are innovative to change the game, to make it more different than its American counterpart. The best four down football is available every Sunday, and the second best four down football is available every Saturday. One of the strengths and one of the things that makes the Canadian football so enduring is that it's not lesser, it's different.
Absolutely.
Right? Because it's different, it's the best three down game on earth, right? It's the best 110-yard field. It's the best 65-yard wide. It's the best pre-snap motion. It's all of those things. It's got the best rouge. I mean, it comes from a place, right? It comes from that lawn at the University of Toronto in the 1860s when they did some sort of hybrid rugby game, and then that made its way up to Montreal where students played reservists, and then that game got played against Harvard, and Harvard playing FA rules, and then in the second half, McGill picked up the ball, and that's the start of what we know as football. I mean, there was a time right up until 1912 where you guys in the States played with 110-yard fields, and until it was realized, hey, baseball is the sport here, and if we want to put our sport on display, we got to put a field in a baseball stadium. That's why you have fields the size you do. It isn't because the field that we had was superior or inferior. It was just market forces driving.
Right. Well, there's a reason why you could barely fit a field into Wrigley Field, and that's why the Bears played there. But yeah, like you said, it's like if it weren't for baseball, probably the fields be a lot larger.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. George Halas always talked about how the field was in Canadian football was better for the game because it opened things up, and always lamented. You bring up the example, actually, like he hated playing in Wrigley Field. Like the wall's right there. Like, back in the day when safety wasn't that much of a concern.
Right. And, just talking about Halas, I mean, the Bears have played, a lot of people don't know, but there have been NFL versus CFL games with hybrid rules. So, but like you said, both sports can equally coexist. And third down football to me, I mean, Canadian football to me, not only is to me the best form of football, but it's also the one thing I love about it is there's that cultural aspect of Canada. And Americans down here don't quite appreciate, at least I don't think so, appreciate the CFL because it's just such a unique Canadian experience. When I watch it, it's very uniquely Canadian. I don't even know how to describe it. Maybe I'm at a loss for words, but it's that Canada part of the sport that just makes the reason why I tune in for every game every week.
Well, I think you actually nailed it quite well there. I mean, it's in some ways it's the same reason. We have a show that follows Canadians in college football in the United States. One of the things that draws me to college football in the U.S. is the pure regionalism of it. How the Pac-12 has got a different frequency than the SEC, and you can divide that side of B 15 ways. Depending on what conference and what lens you look at it through, right? Seeing Chuba Hubbard and Eamon Ogbongbemiga at Oklahoma State perform the way they did over the last few years was, you want to talk about inspiring. That was inspiring, I think, for a lot of Canadian kids once we got the story out there, right?
Right.
So, Chase Claypool, he comes from Abbotsford, about 2 hours away, just in the Lower Mainland, starting at Notre Dame at the end of his freshman season, and now with the Pittsburgh Steelers. following those college stories and seeing some of that history. I mean, it goes both ways over the border, right? In terms of getting that perspective into cultures.
Yeah, with you guys doing the Cornish Trophy, I think that's really cool. It's going into its 4th year. You've awarded it 3 times now?
It's into the 5th year now. Nathan Rourke won it the first 2 times. Quarterback playing at Ohio and Athens. And then Chuba won it last year, and John Mechie the third, the number 2 receiver at Alabama, won it just this past year. So I would have to say John Mechie is probably the odds-on favorite coming into this year as well. So
yeah, he's gonna get another crack.
Yeah, well, and it's funny too, because you take a look at the paths these guys take to get into the NCAA. They're all very different, right? Nathan Rourke left Ontario, with his family, and went to Arkansas, I believe, to a charter school, and played there for a year. Didn't like the offers that he went and played JUCO for a year. Found his way to the MAC, and ended up being one of the best quarterbacks of all time in the MAC. I think you can honestly say that with the numbers he produced and the attention that he drew there. Chuba Hubbard, straight out of high school in Edmonton, like he was as much of a star as he was a football player. Late adopter to the game in about grade 10, and then was discovered through video. And Chase Claypool played all his high school, not a winner but a runner-up twice, and his community ball, but was seen through 7 contests, and that's how he promoted himself. Now John Mechie, he left home in grade 9 and did the academy thing, and developed on the road much the same way a lot of American junior hockey players used to, by coming up to Canada and playing major hockey when you're 15 or 16 years old. He did the reverse thing and went down to the States. So there's all kinds of different routes between Canada and the United States when it comes to developing as a football player.
Well, and I always say, when it comes to football, it's not just, Americans, at least in my opinion, tend to lose sight of the fact that Americans aren't the only ones that are playing ball, and that the Canada is a big part of American football history, and vice versa.
Well, and I always take this time to point this out as president of Football Canada, that the World Junior Tournament is the premier international male tackle tournament. We're the 2-time defending champions. We've won 3. Nobody else has won 3. I know a lot of people in the stateside say, well, we can't get our best players. We only get 3 stars to this thing. But you know what? We didn't have Chuba Hubbard there either. We didn't have our best players in a number of positions either, right? Because they're tied up in NCAA camps. We found a way. We got the gold. That's okay. Take that. We're aching to get back at it again after COVID too, because this World Championship's been delayed now for another 2 years and maybe another 3. So we hosted in Edmonton in 2024, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, good excuse for me. Hopefully by then the border will be open up, and Scott and I can get across there and see not only you there, but also our friends at the Turf District. So
if it's not open by 2024, bigger problems.
Yeah. Well, hey Jim, we really appreciate it, and we know we're out of time here, but yeah. Hey, real quickly before we let you go, can you let everybody know where they can find you?
Yeah, I am let's see, on Instagram, I'm Football Canada Prez with a Z/Z. On Twitter, I'm Jim Mullin TSN. Let me see. Are there any other places? Well, I kind of lurk around a few other social media platforms, but those are the 2 that you can get me at. And I'm quite active on Twitter. Footballcanada.com is the website. I think we still have a couple of Game Use Canada jerseys left there that can go for a song, about $40 a head. There you see, I'm still trying to sell stuff to fund our national teams. And then our TV show on Twitter, it's KGN, on TSN, Crown Gridiron Nation. We are going to be pushing parts of that show out on the footballcanada.com site come this fall. So if you're outside of Canada, you'll be able to see parts of that. That'll get you up to speed on university football and junior football in this country, and some of the stuff that we're doing around football weekend in Canada in mid-October, and what our Canadians are doing in the NCAA as well. And of course, you're in Canada watching the thing. We're on TSN middays starting at the end of August on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays.
Well, this has been fun and informative. It's been great.
Yep.
Oh, thanks. Like I said, guys, it's like where the conversation was taking us, and like, happy to do this at any time if you want to cover anything else off.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And hey, stay on the line real quickly after we click the stop on the record, just for a few moments, and we'll have a few more words. But hey, thank you very much for coming on the show. And this is episode number 10. So episode number 10. You're we had our beta show with just Scott and I. So it is the 10th show where we have the guests on, and so we're really happy to have you today.
Well, I'm going to try to figure out who my favorite number 10 was in CFL history. Reggie Slack wore about 15 different numbers. I'm going to say Reggie Slack right now. Oh, no, Rod Hill. Rod Hill is my favorite number 10. Quarterback for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, had 5 interceptions in a single game. He played on the opposite side of Les Brown. Came up from the Dallas Cowboys. Could have gone back to the NFL, but stayed up in Winnipeg. Rod Hill was a supreme cornerback. Love that guy. My favorite number 10.
Awesome. Well, on that note, hey, everybody, thanks for joining us, and we will be talking to you soon. Hopefully we'll have this show out here shortly. We'll have this show up for download shortly, and we'll be having another show here by the end of the week. Thank you, everybody.
You ought to be here in our town when the Grey Cup is played, 'cause things really swing all over town. With all those pep rallies, dances, and the Grey Cup parade, and Miss Grey Cup wins her crown. Let's go, that football train's pulling in. Let's show we're feeling hearty. You'll know the fun's about to begin, 'cause everybody's invited to the party. And when the crowds start to gather, we will greet everyone, Canadians all from far and near. And from the moment of kickoff till the Grey Cup is won, get in the spirit. Come on, let's hear it. That Grey Cup time of year. Be here in our town when the Grey Cup is played, 'cause things really swing all over town. With all those pep rallies, dances, and the Grey Cup parade, and Miss Grey Cup wins her crown. Let's go, that football train's pulling in. Let's show we're feeling hearty. You'll know the fun's about to begin, 'cause everybody's invited to the party. And when the crowds start to gather, we will greet everyone, Canadian Canadians all from far and near. And from the moment of kickoff till the Grey Cup is won, get in the spirit. Come on, let's hear it at Grey Cup time of year.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.